The Carrot Lady herself. Cubone is the same artist that drew Reinhardt. And that's the first thing I wanted to mention in case some of you do look at this face and you're like, I think I've seen this before. Yes, carrots are everything, guys. Welcome to our analysis on the new units that happen to come out today on the Spring Banner. I hope by the time you've watched this that you haven't pulled on them yet. In general, I always tell people it is not a good idea to pull on the first day of most banners. There is almost never a good reason to do so, especially since this banner is lasting a month. So if you wanted any of these characters for any reason, it's always a good idea to be patient. I'll start off with that. However, there are some reasons that these characters do stand out over others. Seasonal units are a good idea to pull for if you're a collector or you do want some unique unit types. Also, they are definitely easier to get on their debut banners than they are through legendary banners. You do have better odds pulling for them on these banners than you do on a legendary banner, which is split between 12 focus units. So that is what I'd have to say about summoning before we get into it. But let's look at the units themselves, their stat spreads, and what you could consider briefly building on them that will help you make these decisions. So first up, we have possibly one of the best looking male characters in the game, and I thought I'd never be saying this considering it's Alphonse. But yeah, it seems like he is indeed candidate for one of the best looking males in the game. So the thing that's definitely unique about him is that Axe Cavaliers in general have not been that competitive because there's just not that many of them. There's actually only 3 more other than Alphonse, who just got released. So we have Titania, Frederick, and Gunter. And because Gunter has extremely low BST, he is unfortunately not that important when compared to Titania and Frederick. Now, Frederick does have similar attack stats to Alphonse. I don't know the exact amount, but I do know it's very similar, if not exactly the same. It might be one difference probably, but this does mean that any offensive stat spread build that Frederick ran, Alphonse can too. So the builds you'd usually run on Frederick could have been something like a defensive slaying axe build. Most popular though was his brave axe set because of his great attack stat. With the defensive slaying axe build, you could have run something like Ignis, QR, Bonfire. Those builds definitely worked on Freddy and actually helped him with his slow speed. Now the difference here is that Alphonse can run an opposite kind of set. With his high speed, he is actually able to competently run a brave axe set like Freddy could with high attack, but also reach speed stats that could result in quads. This is assuming you have the right IVs and the right support. So with Hone Cavalry, you could be running a Brave Axe set, Speed Seal plus Speed IV, Desperation, Death Blow, or Swift Sparrow, and he's going to be able to quad. Yes, Alphonse has enough speed to quad, especially if you give him Hone Cavalry. So that's pretty legit. Now, the thing is, Titania had the speed, the other Green Axe Cavalier, but she didn't have the attack. So Titania could have run a quad set, but in most cases, because of her low attack stat, you might have seen something like 0x4. It's possible. That's going to separate him from Frederick. Now, in general, I think Frederick is still going to be the dominant user of a Brave Axe set, and that's because Alphonse is... he doesn't have the availability that Frederick has. Okay, Frederick has 3-star and 4-star availability. Sorry, in most cases, if you're just planning to run a Brave Axe set on Alphonse, the only reason you should be doing so is because you want to actually make a quad set, which would make him unique compared to Frederick. That's the only reason that you would want Alphonse. Otherwise, there's no reason to. With Frederick's 3 or 4-star availability, it's much easier to get a 4-star fully merged Frederick, and there's no reason to be using Alphonse because Frederick will have higher firepower. You'll probably have a plus attack IV much easier than you would with Alphonse. You'll need like a plus speed IV. So if you have thousands of orbs to burn for Alphonse to make that super glorified set, there's just no reason to do so. Now, one thing I obviously didn't consider here was the fact that his giant spoon is probably going to be pretty good on his base kit. Instead of using a slaying axe defensive set that Frederick could have ran, Alphonse can run like an offensive Wodao kind of giant spoon set. And I could see him maybe doing that with stuff like Fury 3, running Moonbow, You could run, again, things like Desperation in Moonbow. So if you had, you know, Quick Impulse, for instance, if you had Luna, all these skills are going to result in great doubles and great effect that he could stand out compared to Frederick and Titania. So that's also one thing to consider. For fodder reasons, I think Defense Smoke is actually incredible if you're going to use it on Brave Bow archers, okay? So for fodder reasons, Giant Spoon and Defense Smoke are amazing. If you are a big fan of Brave Bow with dancers, definitely Defense Smoke is going to be nice here. Now, you don't necessarily have to be pulling Alphonse for Defense Smoke. I think Defense Smoke is going to come down as a skill down the road. I even think a Woe Dao Axe hopefully comes down the road. So hopefully you're not pulling for skill fodder and you consider the unit itself. So that's pretty much what I think about Alphonse. Let's move on. Next up, we got Shurina. The thing about what I'm going to say about Shurina and Katria here is that the reason you should use these two units is for what they come with and not what they're compared to, okay? So Shurina's stat spread is very comparable to what Nino's is, but has better res. So she has the speed to match Nino, a little bit lower attack stat, but much better res. The attack stat isn't so significant when you're talking about Ground Blade, for instance, and you can pretty much dump the exact same set on Shurina here as you could on Nino. What that means is that Shurina is great as a Ground Blade user. Now, unfortunately, just like how I said about Alphonse, there's absolutely no reason to be using Shurina with a Ground Blade set when their Nino has a 3 and 4 star availability, just like Frederick. So if you're going to be using Shurina here as a Ground Blade user, it's just not a good idea when you can be merging up a 4-star plus 10 Nino, which costs you like nothing, or a 5-star plus 10 Nino, which hands down will be superior to the Shurina. The one thing Shurina has going for her is her high res, okay? And this might actually be useful if we're going to consider chill res in the meta, where I think Nino is actually going to struggle maybe to tank Reinhardt and such now again, unless you're really giving her a lot of defensive stats. Now, here's what I do recommend you use Shurina and Katria for if you do plan to get them. For me, as I said before, it's an easy skip banner for me, but Katria and Shurina do have legendary unique weapons. That's the eggs, and these eggs are like debuffing eggs, kind of like a chilling seal. They have different effects, different conditions, and what makes these two units unique compared to all other units, regardless of class, is the fact that they are good support units, okay, with decent offensive stats. So if you get these units, just use their default weapons. Don't try to make them other units. That's basically my point here, okay? Their default kits aren't too bad necessarily, so if you're going to work with Shurina, you can basically use her as a support unit. You can give her even like a chill speed if you pull that from Fallen Celica. If you have chill defense, for instance, you could be getting that. I don't know if whether it's, I didn't check the egg effect. To just give her a chill in the B slot, that'd be pretty good as giving her further support. Or you could be running something like a breaker in the B. You could run like an axe breaker. You could run a lance breaker if you're just going to bench her for arena assault and bring her in just for those debuffs. A slot, of course, can be something like Fury. If you want to give her offensive power, maybe you could run Swift Sparrow. But in general, I think Fury would be good to complement her high resistance and high offensive pressure. B for Desperation, again, also works if you want to make her more player phase rather than support phase. But you should keep her weapon. I just don't think that making her a Ground Blade user is going to accomplish anything when, honestly, Nino exists, okay? She might be technically a better Ground Blade user because of her high res, but that's going to require high merges, and unless you have thousands of orbs to spend, it's not worth it. Not with Nino doing basically the same thing. Okay, so comparing that to Katria. Katria, again, has an egg effect, great support unit, also comes with chill res, so out of the box, you're going to have a great support unit to use on your team. However, just like Shurina, her spot as a blue cavalry is very saturated, very much taken by other units, and you could end up just using something like Owen, Ursula, Reinhardt. There's La Rochelle at 4-star availability. So basically, again, Katria shouldn't be trying to run what these other units can already run with similar offensive stat spreads. And that's because those units have more availability. So again, unless you have thousands of orbs to spend, there's no reason for you to be getting a single Katria here, and Ursula is going to be able to get merged up to +4 maybe. I forgot how many she's available, but just off of that alone is going to make her just as powerful as Catria could be. You could be pulling La Rochelle's. La Rochelle has a decent stat spread as well. Could be using the Blade Tome. Again, I know Catria is a good user of Blarblade, but you're not taking advantage of the fact that she has a unique weapon in her arsenal. She also comes with Chill Res, which you have to fodder her off to take advantage of, or you could just strictly use her as a unique unit with that egg, and that's what I'm going for. Again, because she's going to be a support unit, you can choose to either give her Fury to bait out some units. Maybe a seal could be something like QR Seal. If you're fighting fast units, you could be running Distant Defense. There's plenty of options that you can compare. Not Blade Mage units, because you don't really want to necessarily change Chill Res. You could change it for Desperation, but I think Chill Res has a lot of value here. So again, please stick to their default weapons. Unless you have like +8, +9, +10 versions of these units, there's no reason to be pushing them. We might not see them for months down the road, and if you're stuck with only a single copy, you're not merging them up, they're going to fall behind when it comes to stat spreads, unfortunately. And I know that Catria here does have the same stat spread as Reinhardt, Ursula, Olwen, La Rochelle, okay? In terms of IVs, again, plus speed or plus attack is optimal on most of these units, actually. If I was to look at them strictly from beginning to end, I would say Alphonse could favor a plus speed, defense, or attack IV, with his Banes being res or HP easily. Sharina could definitely favor a plus speed or plus attack IV. Even a plus res IV would be pretty good here. Dumping the HP or defense will be totally fine. And for Catria, again, plus speed, plus attack, with dumping any of the bulky stats, HP, defense, or res, with likely defense being the one that you could dump. If you get unoptimal IVs, then of course, you know, bench them or put a breaker on them. With Catria though, I don't think changing out her beast slot would be that good. So, and finally we have our final unit on the list here, the Carrot Lady herself. So, Cubone is the same artist that drew Reinhardt. And that's the first thing I wanted to mention in case some of you do look at this face and you're like, I think I've seen this before. Yes, carrots are everything, guys. Carrots are indeed everything. So anyways, this stat spread for daggers, again, not even considering that she's a flying dagger, is incredible. That's an incredible stat spread. 35-34 is very comparable to the New York Takumi that came out recently and Soth. Unfortunately for Kagro, she suffers from the exact same problem that all seasonals have, and that's availability. So in the long term, a Soth will generally outperform her just because you'll be able to work on a Soth through natural pulls of colorless playing the game over the long term. However, Kagro does have a few things that make her strictly unique compared to Soth or New York Takumi. And that's, first of all, the fact that she does indeed come with the Woe Dao dagger, which is specific to her. So that opens up a lot of build options that you could run. One of them being like a huge AoE special build. If you guys haven't seen that before, it's very similar to what I run on my Lilina, and you can really amplify AoE specials doing that. That's one thing you consider. Another thing to consider as well is that she's a flyer, so that means she could actually be benefiting from Hone Flyers and Fortify Flyers. This means that she will dominate, and looking at this stat spread itself means that she will actually outperform Soth as hands down the best poison dagger user with enough merges and stat spreads. Objectively speaking, if you were to dump her on a flyer team, have Hone Flyers running, gold flyers, and with a poison dagger, she should one-shot literally every single infantry unit in the game. So the thing is, unfortunately, because of that limited availability, the seasonals, and you can't expect everyone to have plus 10 units here, Soth does indeed outperform her, but in a vacuum, plus 10 means that Kagro is the best user of a build that could use Poison Dagger. Now, I don't actually think you should be using Poison Dagger when you do have Woe Dao as an option, that you could be running crazy AoE builds, that you do have so many more options than that, but I think it's just funny to look at it mathematically speaking, and if you put Kagro in a vacuum, plus attack, that old meta with Kagro defeating all infantry units, you could literally just pull like a single version of her and make her total anti-infantry on a flyer team, which is kind of amazing to think about. So what actually makes Kagro unique is the fact that just like Spring Camila last spring, Spring Camilla was the first ranged flyer, but also more specifically, she was also a mage, like magical damage for flyers at that time. Now this is our first instance of range physical damage, which makes Kagero unique in class here. Unfortunately, again, she's limited by seasonals, but that is actually quite important to consider in those situations where if you had a flyer team and you didn't have that range physical option, you might be in a little bit of trouble. Now, the thing is, you do usually have a lot of melee flyers on the team, and the situations in which you needed a range physical flyer over a melee flyer are not that common as you might think. Because most melee flyers, especially player phase units, should be running either drag back or hidden run, so their positions should be relatively the same. I'm saying, like, if you attacked with Kagero, she would be 2 spaces away, and let's say using somebody like Cordelia, you hidden run, you're going to be in the exact same spot as a Kagero also hitting. So when you think about it, the whole physical range damage doesn't really apply in some cases. Of course, the thing to consider in contrast is the fact that you do avoid retaliations from the units that cannot disencounter. You can attack over walls, you can attack maybe specifically walls or crates or something like that, and that's where the range does come in handy over somebody that would be melee. Sometimes you can't hit and run in some awkward janky positions, again if you have a wall or something in the way, so that's where that range physical damage does come in handy. However, somebody like Fire Sweep Cordelia doesn't need to worry about counterattacks, hit and runs out, and melee flyers even have the advantage of Gale Force. So comparatively speaking, I don't think range physical damage flyer is as useful as something like range magical flyers was at the time. In fact, I think Myrrh being melee magical flyer is more important than Kagero is, and thankfully Myrrh is in the permanent pool to round out a flyer team where they might need that. So I think Kagero is a great unit because she's unique in class, and there might be situations in where that happens, but unfortunately, because of the limited availability of a seasonal unit, you're not going to truly see the potential of this unit when it compares to something that could be like plus 10 Cordelias, which you could work on, plus 10 Shershis, which you could work on. Now that female Morgan is officially in the pool, you could officially work on that as well in the long term, when you might see female Morgan and more banners down the road. You're not going to see Kagero on many banners. In fact, with the Spring banner now confirming that they're not going to be rerunning the old ones, Spring Crom, Spring Camilla, Spring Xander, and Spring Lucina, this means that I can comfortably say that the availability problem is even more prominent in these seasonal units, and make sure that if you do go for these units, that you do understand that in the long term, they are not going to be as great as some of the other units you could work on. Anyways, Kagero build herself. If you do plan to use her as just one copy, she's going to be great on both player phase or enemy phase. If you want to go for something crazy on the bench where you bring her out for Arena Assault, I think a Deathblow build with Poison Dagger with Hone Flyers and Gold Flyers will literally one-shot every infantry in the game. She could definitely have that niche that her infantry couldn't compare to. But besides that, you can use her on both phases with her default dagger, with something like Fury 3, as always. She has great res. You could just keep her default A skill, by the way. You don't have to use Fury. The thing is, with Fury, you could open yourself up to actually tanking more physical threats, because her default skill is Speed Res Bond, so that kind of helps you tank out like magical users, but it doesn't give you additional attack per se. And it doesn't give you additional defense, which unfortunately makes it harder. Now also consider Fury always helps you out with getting into Desperation range, whereas the bonds may not. You may not get into Desperation range, especially if you have really high resistance stats. You tank a resistance hit, like a magical hit, and you do not end up dying there. That's where the contrast of that happens. I do think the bond skill is great, but it is conditional. You do need to rely on units beside you. Fury, kind of self-independent, can synergize with Desperation, can work great like for that. With specials, it's pretty simple. You pretty much just use Moonbow if you want to keep the default dagger. If you don't want to keep the default dagger, I think Kagami Mochi, which came from Takumi, another seasonal unit, would be a good alternative. Unfortunately, because of availability, that isn't too great of an option either, because you're killing off another good unit for a good unit, and it's pretty much like wasting resources at that time. Any other pretty much offensive build will work here. Fury Desperation, Speed Seals, Attack Seals. I just think what makes her definitely unique is going to be like a Poison Dagger build. I'd love to see that. Other than that, though, you just give her, you know, she has Gold Flyers in the sea, you can probably keep that, but if you don't want to keep that, she is going to be a good user of 4 to 5 Flyers in the sea, especially if you combine her with a Blade Mage. So anyways, that was pretty much it. I think if you're going to be targeting one unit on this banner, in terms of uniqueness of a unit, it's going to be Alphonse if you want to do some crazy quad Brave Axe horse shenanigans. Definitely think that's cool. You could also use Giant Spoon. And the other unit here is going to be Kagero because she's unique in class. I don't think she'll be unique in class forever. If you're going to be targeting, you know, one of these two units, it's going to be that. I think that Sharina and Catcher are both cute and great collector units. They do have some pretty incredible fodder with Catria having Chill Res, and their units are definitely unique. However, I expect Chill Res to show up in the future, so you don't need to be pulling for it now. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. As for IVs, as I said, all of them are going to prefer either plus attack or plus speed. That's pretty much it, guys. Thanks for watching.